Hagee podcast. This is a very special episode because I am hosting with Matt my father-in-law, Pastor John Hagee, and we're talking about Father's Day. Having two fathers here and looking at my father-in-law that raised you to be the father of our four kids, I am just beyond blessed to sit here with both of you.
Well, I have to tell you that before we even get into the topic of fatherhood and having a conversation with our audience about fatherhood, I want it noted that this is a historic moment because I know about 41 years of your personal history. That's how long I've been with you. But in the 78 years that you've been alive...
79.
79. We're going to count them all. 79 years that you've been alive. This is your first podcast. I don't think you've ever podcasted before.
This is a first.
You know, I mean, when people say some things will never change, I just say, hold on, we haven't shown you everything yet. But, Dad, thank you for being here to discuss fatherhood with Kendall and I. I think that fatherhood is one of the most important and most powerful topics in our world today. And I'd like to add to that, one of the most endangered. Right. Fatherhood is vanishing. Why?
Fatherhood is vanishing because the American family is disintegrating. Because years ago, Lyndon Baines Johnson started a program called the War on Poverty, and he started giving financial aid to young ladies who birthed illegitimate children. And when the family started getting government grants for defying the authority of the family, it started disintegrating. Drugs came to our country. Fathers became involved in drug addiction and also the selling of drugs. America began to morally become unraveled, and we had fatherless homes. Right now, the statistic is that 76% of children living in a home are not living with their mom and dad. Wow. This is the chaotic crisis of our country. And if we're going to rediscover righteousness in America, we have to rediscover the foundations of the family that began with the father and the mother. God places the responsibility of the family on the father. You fathers, provoke not your children, but train them up. And that Greek word train is gymnot, which we get gymnasium. Train them up in the fear of the Lord. That means you show them over and over, like a coach teaching a boy how to shoot a basketball or how to stand holding a bat and how to hit the ball as it comes across the plate. Show them over and over how to pray, how to go to church. You don't send them to church with their mother. You go to church with them. You become the principle of righteousness that they see. That is the salvation of America, when fathers began to become righteous and godly fathers.
And you know, you mentioned Paul's writings to the New Testament church. That theme is even in the Old Testament with what Moses wrote in Deuteronomy after the Lord told him, fathers, show your children. Right. Show them as you sit at your table. Show them as you walk in the way. Train them up in these commandments. Behold, O Israel, the Lord our God is one, and you shall diligently show your children. From beginning to end, God has always looked for men who will train their children. And you know, with that being said, I think it's important to congratulate every man who is listening that is doing his biblical responsibility, because in all fairness, they are some of the most important people in the world today.
You are the American hero. It's not the guy throwing the football for the NFL championship team. It's not the guy who is being celebrated as the greatest basketball player who ever dribbled a basketball. It's not the guy on Wall Street who's making $1 jillion that matters. It's the father. that slugs it out day after day, providing for his family, that makes time for his children, and lets those children know beyond any shadow of a doubt that he loves them, that there's nothing in the world he would not do for them, that they have his top priority time. If he has any situation, that he will postpone that situation to take care of the priority of the children, of the wife and the family. That's the American hero. That's the person that needs to be celebrated. Tragically, in our country, that's not the case right now. But I want to say to every child who's watching, every child who's living at home, if you have a father who loves your mother, who provides for you, you have the most wonderful treasure you'll ever have as a young person.
So to all of the American heroes who are listening to this podcast today, we want to say to you, Happy Father's Day. And, Kendall, you've had the opportunity to get to know Pastor Hagee as your father in love, as you say.
Yes, and a papa of 13 grandchildren.
He in your life has been a lot of the role of papa.
Yes.
Because, as our children, we've got them from 14 down to 6 now.
Yes.
14 to 6. They've always had a very endearing relationship with their grandfather. I can give you personal testimony of what he was like as a father, because fathers and grandfathers are different animals.
The house of yes when it comes with papa.
Yeah, I grew up in a house of no unless I say otherwise. And my children have never walked into an environment less than what do you want next? So we call it the house of yes now that it's Papa Hagee's house. But Dad, when you were raising your 5 children, there's 3 P's that I want to point out. And the first P was you raised us on purpose. Mm-hmm. You did not allow life to dictate to us circumstances. As a father, you gave us direction and purpose, and we focused on that as kids. We didn't always stay absolutely focused. We were distracted. We had struggles. We were normal, rowdy, red-blooded American kids. But the thing that was so consistent for me as a child, and looking back now that I'm a father of my own 4 children, is that every day you instilled in us purpose. Where did that instinct, that paternal nature come from? And I know the impact of it, but where did it start for you?
Well, it started for me when I became a parent. Now, my father was a Pentecostal pastor. And my father did not spend time with me. He didn't spend time with his children, period. He was fully committed all waking hours to the church.
Overly committed.
Overly committed to the church. He never went to a football game. He never went to a baseball game. I was a 4-sport letterman from middle school to high school. Played football at the university. He never saw a game I ever played in, not ever.
Not from middle school till you got through your college days?
Yeah, till I graduated as a senior from Trinity University. Never asked, with my picture in the Houston Chronicle laying on the dinner table, never asked, why are you in the newspaper? He just knew it was sports. And as far as he was concerned, that was of the world and should not be discussed, should not be applauded. And I was something of a pariah from the 7th grade all the way through my life while I was living at home. I didn't have 10 minutes of his time for anything unless it had to do with church. When I became a father, I made up my mind when my first child was born that I was going to give that child top priority in everything she did, and on all 5 of my children. If they were in a school play playing the part of a potted plant in the back of the stage, I was there.
And cheering for the plant.
And cheering for the plant. Yeah, God bless the plant on the back of the stage. If I went to Matt's football practices, not game, I went to his practices and watching. It was true I had a book reading in the shade, but I was
there.
I was there, and everywhere they went, where they were doing anything, I was there because I know from personal experience what not being there meant.
And I think that that's an important thing because, if you were to speak to me about my father, I wouldn't be able to say, well, this is where he was lacking. I'm certain there are no perfect fathers because there are no perfect men. But I can say that in my childhood, I could not look or want for more. So when somebody sees me with my children, they immediately make an excuse. And the excuse is, well, he had somebody show him how to father. That's right, yeah. So that's why he does what he does as a father. But you very clearly pointed out that you didn't have the kind of father you were.
That's true.
You made the choice to be that kind of father. And I think that's important for people who are listening because there's a lot of men, unfortunately, that relate to your situation. They didn't hear "I love you" from dad. They didn't get regular encouragement from dad. Dad didn't come to the events that they were involved in. Dad was not in their life for a multitude of reasons. And sometimes they carry that forward into their fatherhood, saying, you know what? I didn't have a good dad. I don't know how to be a good dad, so don't blame me if I'm not a dad. They have a choice.
You bet. You have a choice to be everything that your children need, and just because that you were denied the love of your father is certainly not a license for you to be like your father. The curse needs to be broken. Amen. And you need to focus on the fatherhood of God, not the person who raised you. God the Father is a God of love. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And when you have that kind of love for your children, it nurtures them. They explode with potential. They feel like they're the best because you tell them over and over they're the best. And I think I probably oversold it on Sandy. I mean, whenever
I'm going to agree with you on that one.
I bought her the video.
Hope you're watching, Sandy, on Facebook.
I bought her the video Orphan Annie, and
it was a cassette tape back in the day about that thick.
Yeah, and she could sing that tape from front to back. But every time guests would come over to the house, she would, as soon as they were in the door, she'd clap her hands and say, "Come listen to me." And she'd get on the fireplace and start singing.
Tomorrow,
the
sun will come out tomorrow.
And if people didn't listen, she would
just sing louder.
She just sing louder.
Yeah,
I mean, and brother, she had a voice that knocked the paint off the wall.
Yeah, the neighbors were sick of that song. And there wasn't even a microphone in the house.
Yeah.
But the thing about that is you did that on purpose.
I did.
You made a purposeful decision that you were going to be the parent you needed to be. And you didn't have a manual to read from other than the Word of God.
Yeah.
And so you were present on purpose, like you were talking about going to practices, going to games, going to all these things. Your presence was there because it was purposeful. When I was a kid, I thought, it's really cool that Dad's here. Now that I'm a father and I go to practices, or I'm a father and I go to plays, I'm also a professional with a very busy schedule.
The sacrifice.
And I recognize that it takes a purposeful decision to say, I'm getting up from what I'm doing and I'm going over there. Not that I don't have something else to do. I just have some place more important to be.
That's right.
And that's a purposeful decision. So you were present on purpose. You protected on purpose. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by protection, you were aware of all of the people who were in our lives. If we went out socially, and Kendall can relate to this because when we started dating, the first thing you said is,
My first date was with Dad and Mom.
Was at our house.
Yes.
You know, Dad said, bring her over to the house, which didn't sound strange to me because that was how everything started in our world. But, you know, Kendall says, we're going to your house. I said, yeah. She said, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to sit on the couch and talk to Dad. and you know, the reason for that is because every father has been given spiritual authority over their children. And I think that's something that American fathers in the modern world miss. I talk to a lot of dads who say, well, how can I get my children to? And you fill in the blank. How can I get them to obey? How can I get them to do this? How can I get them to do that? And when they ask that question, they don't recognize or they have already forfeited their authority.
Yes, indeed.
And so you told us, if you're going to go out with your friends this weekend, start here at the house. And on purpose, you were walking through every one of our friends. You'd ask them, what's your name? What are your parents' names? What do they do? Where do they go to church? And some of those kids thought they were getting FBI J. Edgar Hoover treatment. But the bottom line is you were getting a sense for who they were. Yeah. And whether or not they were going to be a problem for us.
Yes.
And your perspective was simply this: it only takes one bad apple to destroy the life of your child, and I love my kid way too much to let one bad influence do that to them.
That's exactly right.
And so when you came across people that you didn't want us around, how did you handle that?
I would simply say to you, first of all, I would say to my children, if you want to have a party, have it at our house. I don't care if there's 3 or 30 or 50. The number is not the problem. I want to know everybody that's an influence on your life. And we had some large groups on that back porch, and
especially with that little orphan Annie singer, she'd throw a party and the whole neighborhood show up.
Absolutely, and as you said, I would meet those people on the back porch as they came in the door, and so forth and so on. And I just had a radar gear in me for the bad apple, and I said that person is not someone you need to identify with. You need to find another friend, and you did, and those people did not have an influence on you. When my girls were dating someone that I knew was not good for them, I said, "This is not God's answer in your life. Just keep looking. This is not the one." And whenever you and I were having breakfast at the
Jim's Diner right up here on the corner.
Jim's Diner, and you were graduated from college, and you were the associate pastor of our church, and I was very concerned about who you would marry. And Kendall walked through the door, and I said, we're there about 7 o'clock in the morning, by the way, on Sunday morning.
No, sir, we were there at 6:45 because we had to be at church by 7:30.
So Kendall came in. I said, "Matt, who is that?" He said, "She's a nurse, and the 2 people sitting over there are related to her." I said, "Well, she been working all night?" She said, "Yes, she's been working all night." And about the second or third week, she came through there through the front doors of the restaurant, just as regular as clock. I said, "Man, somebody that has the discipline enough to work all night and come to church first service," I said, "that's somebody you need to get to know." "Oh, Dad, I don't know about that." I said, "Let me tell you something." I said, you need to get to know her."
And in my courage, he walked over and introduced us.
He called me over. I think it was a whistle. Come here, baby.
Yeah. Yeah. I did.
I said, "Well, how do you suggest I get to know her?" And he said, "Let me show you."
Yeah.
And whistled at her.
Waved me
She
over.
came over there, and the next thing you know, a few weeks later, you were at a church event, and the conversation was extended something like an hour, and The next thing I know, Kendall's over at the house watching a football game, and bang.
Sitting on the couch getting the J. Edgar Hoover.
I guarantee you, I was there watching.
Yeah.
And it turned out great.
But see, the thing about that concept of purpose, you protected on purpose and you were present on purpose, which as I became older, you're sitting there listening to this conversation, you go, here's a 20-something-year-old man. He's working. He's a professional. How does his father have such influence over him? Because you were there on purpose. You were so present in my life. Always, that my trust was built around your advice. You had never betrayed me. There are a lot of young men who have been betrayed by their paternal influence. And so they don't believe that they have anything of value to receive from their father. Mm-hmm. And that becomes a real problem, especially when it comes to the relationship they have with God the Father.
Absolutely.
They did not have a good connection with their earthly father, so all of the attributes that were in that natural relationship, they carry it over into the supernatural relationship, and therefore trust is an issue, and disclosure is an issue, and commitment is an issue, and there's just a significant amount of spiritual baggage that they've got to unpack before they can have an intimate relationship with God the Father, because there was no intimacy in the relationship they have with their earthly father. When you have the opportunity to encourage people who are sitting in that circumstance, what do you say?
Well, I'll say to every father who's listening to me, your children are more important than your job. It's more important than your paycheck. You will receive benefits from investing in your children that go far beyond a monetary return. I said, money can't climb up on your lap and kiss your cheek. Money can't hug you at night and say, Daddy, I love you. Money can't come through the door and say, Dad, this is the girl I'm marrying. When our grandchildren get in one house, all 13 of them, and I mean just they're raising the roof. Yeah, it's a joyful sound to me.
You couldn't hear a cannon go off because they'd drown it out.
They are loud and rowdy, but they're all loving, gracious, wonderful children raised by righteous parents. It's like heaven on earth every time they get together. One of them or all of them. It is just a beautiful, wonderful, joyous occasion when that happens.
And the last thing that you did on purpose, and it's not the last thing, but I mean, I could go on for a long time. You were present on purpose. You protected on purpose. The last point for our conversation, I should say, you persevered on purpose. Because it wasn't always easy.
That's true.
Between the work-life balance, while we were growing up, the church was growing up. Yes. While we were maturing, the ministry was maturing. And there are a lot of people who, they come to a crossroads. What do I do now? Do I take my time and devote more of it over here? Do I take my time and devote more of it over here? And people who know our family, leaders that you've had the chance to influence, other ministers, other pastors, without fail, they all remark about the fact that all 5 of your children are still in church and their families are in church. Yes. And how uncommon that is. Yes. And I always tell them, I said, it's because he put us first.
Always.
Most pastors put the church first and then the family second. Yes. And we were first and the church was second. So from my childhood, I can testify to the fact that I saw the church as an extension of the family. Mm-hmm. I didn't see it as a replacement of the family. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't always easy. You had to persevere on purpose to make sure that goal was something that was done. And now that you're 79, I gave you 78 earlier, but I'm going to go ahead and round it up now. Now that you're 79, and as you mentioned, looking back over your children and your children's children in your home, I think that it's safe to say that you would tell fathers who are out there persevering on purpose is worth it.
There are no words in human speech to describe the joy of all of your children coming to your house who love the Lord, who love each other, whose children love their parents, and the grandchildren who genuinely love you. That is a treasure Fort Knox cannot match. And you have to make up your mind, what is the top priority in your life? And God has already set that priority. The priority is your children. You fathers, provoke not your children. Don't provoke them by not being there when they need you, by not going to their school events, by not making them feel like that they are center stage in your life. Don't provoke them by ignoring them when they have a problem. Help them solve the problem, whatever the problem. Whenever they get in trouble, they should see you as their first source of refuge, not as someone to run away from because of fear of what you're going to do or say. My children knew that whatever their problem, I was in the problem with them. If they were misbehaving, we would reconcile that on the backside of a solution.
Or on our own backside.
Yeah.
Multiple meanings.
But the objective was to get the thing solved so that they felt comfortable and we could go forward and learn. They learned not to do that. Your children are just gifts of heaven, and just don't mismanage that opportunity. Don't wait till your child gets 16 and is picked up for drugs or something like that. When you get involved in your children's life when they come home from the hospital, I did, and I never turned loose, and I never regret it.
Well, and I think that that's an encouragement to fathers to hear from somebody that, one, didn't have it the way it should have been when he was a child, but certainly made a decision to do it the way that you did as a father. And now that you are a grandfather, seeing the harvest, because there are a lot of long days when you're raising kids.
You bet.
But they're just a few short years. And then whatever you did in that short period of time is going to be what you reap for the next generation.
Amen.
Well, Daddy, for what you've done in my life, I want to tell you happy Father's Day and thank you so very much. I've said it privately. I say it publicly. If billboards weren't so expensive, I'd buy you one right out in front of the church.
Post your big.
But I want to encourage those of you who are listening that you have an opportunity today to make a decision. And for some of you, you need to make the decision to be the father that God called you to be. For others of you, you need to make the decision to reestablish a relationship with the father that God gave you. He may not have done everything right, but if you will honor him, God will bless you. And I assure you that I've seen that work out in more ways than I can count. But for each and every one of you, I think that this has been an important conversation for you to be a part of, and Kendall and I want to thank you because dads, you are making the everyday difference in the lives of every child that God has blessed you with. Thank you for being with our program. We look forward to talking to you soon.